Sup guys, it's Great Death Sentence here, and today we're going to be doing a video about what if the Avengers from Earth's Mightiest Heroes can defeat the Fatal Five, another Can They Survive series. Now it is pretty difficult to write a concrete story with the Avengers in it, since the Fatal Five goals kind of conflict with the Avengers entire verse. So it's going to be more fanficky than usual, but basically we're just putting the Avengers in a Justice League position and see if they can, stop the threats that the Justice League did in the Justice League versus Fatal 5 movie. Anyway, so here's the plot. So basically the Leagues of Heroes would fight against the Fatal 5 as it did in the original series. But this time, when they travel back in past, they actually travel back to a different dimension, Starboy included. The Fatal Five would arrive in the Avengers Earth's Mightiest, just in the middle of the city in New York, right beside Avengers Tower, and Starboy would arrive somewhere far away. There wouldn't be anyone to take him into a mental hospital like it was in the beginning, so Star-Lord will quickly adapt to the new timeline. He would pretty much adapt, knowing that he would try to find some way to get back into the timeline and pretty much just bide his time, since Batman wouldn't really be here to, put him into custody. And with the Fatal Five, they would eventually get investigated by the Avengers and put into the Avengers Tower. Some time would pass, 9 months later, and some time would pass, and Bruce Banner, Iron Man, Ant-Man, and Iron Man are investigating, the tunnel which the Fatal Five arrived in, trying to figure out what it's about. Eventually, the Fatal Five would escape like in the original, and this is when the first battle will commence. Now, we need to examine how strong the Fatal Five is in comparison to the Avengers. The Fatal Five were able to decently battle the Justice League, and they were even able to hurt Superman. It's very clear that they were using magic to do so, which is why Superman got hurt in the first place. But the Fatal Five did put up a good fight, but they basically lost every single encounter against the Justice League, and really Superman and Mr. Terrific almost beat all of them alone in that scene, until eventually they retreated. When they eventually have the full set, they do put up much more of a fight, and they actually do defeat the members of the Justice League with the help of, their queen helping beat them. But to be honest with you, all the lower ranking members were basically defeated, and the queen had to clutch up. She's clearly very strong in using some type of magical ability that none of the heroes can really fight against. It more so just caught them off guard really, but they never really defeat her. Jessica Combs beats her up using her Green Lantern ring. And she does something which causes them to get destroyed. And a building falls on top of them. It's very unclear how they end up dying. They more than likely just escaped, since, the entire fucking Earth was about to be destroyed. But they don't really get defeated, but they end up having to retreat because of Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones, because of this universe, actually isn't in this timeline, so the Avengers will not have access to her. It's going to be very interesting to see how they survive, even if they survive. But eventually the first battle will commence. The people that will be in the room would be Bruce Banner and Iron Man. So the Fatal Five would eventually break out and they would start to attack. Now, we already established in the last video that Iron Man is not the strongest Avenger, at least in this universe. He's more of a long-range fighter, and if people get close to him, he does suck at close quarters combat. His armor can take the blows, but wouldn't last too long. Thankfully, though, Bruce Banner is here. And Bruce Banner is the fucking Hulk. So, to compare animated Hulk to animated Superman is known for being notoriously the weakest Superman, and there isn't enough evidence to suggest that Superman is even planetary, but it should be at least multi-city level and probably country level as well, or continental level. There are multiple villains stated that they would pretty much life wipe and destroy Earth. Not Earth itself, but just kill everybody on it. This means nukes and all other weapons wouldn't work against them. They would pretty much destroy all of them, including some heroes. So Superman would scale to that. Now, it's really hard to see how Superman punched Darkseid. The shockwave didn't even destroy a couple of buildings, And since Superman can defeat at the very least life-wiping type enemies, and Darkseid is definitely way stronger and even got way stronger, it's possible this version of Superman is planetary, but at best he's probably continental or country level at his strongest. He could definitely destroy or wipe off the planet. As he can destroy it, I really don't know. Maybe there's evidence in the series to really dig deep, but at the very least, he's multi-city level or multi-country level at his strongest, and possibly planetary. Hulk scales above characters like Thor in his own universe. Thor took a blast that was gonna do some serious damage to Earth. Well, it probably wouldn't have destroyed it. The blast was going to do some serious damage and was probably a little bit more powerful than a nuke. It was said it was going to devastate the planet. Thor took this head on, and while he did get put into a coma and did get defeated, Hulk is obviously way stronger than Thor, as he consistently one-shotted Thor and consistently beating the crap out of him. Hulk doesn't really have any like feats where he's like destroying a building or lifting New York or any feats like that, but he's constantly beating up characters who can do so. Hulk is really stronger even in his own universe. He doesn't really have a definitive limit, and the state that his power could be pretty much infinite. Hulk in this universe is definitely multi-city level and has the exact same load that Hulk has, because he has the ability to light up the planet. This means nukes and all that other stuff actually wouldn't apply to him. It's possibly this version of Superman is actually physically stronger than this Hulk, as this Hulk, as far as I remember, doesn't have anything stating that he is planetary. But this Hulk is, at the very least, at his best, multi-country level and could accomplish the same feats that Superman could do, even if he is slightly weaker than him. Anyway, Superman basically almost soloed all of the Fury, and Hulk is about on his level, so Hulk would pretty much fine here. With the assistance of Iron Man, they would cause a fatal 3, I guess, to retreat, and eventually they would retreat. By this point, Starboy would hear about their attack on the news and would make his way to the Avengers. The Avengers would start to investigate, what's happening. Starboy would eventually come to them and explain what's going on. He would explain he's from an alternate dimension, and they came back in this dimension to get something. Now, since Jessica Jones doesn't exist in this universe, the Fatal Five decide that while doing their time message, they decided to, they have a device to make them travel in between dimensions. And so they decide to, basically get a Norn Stone, which will accomplish, everything the Green Lantern ring did, or help them free their, wife, essentially. So to do this, they would need to basically get the attention of Thor and try to get them. They will begin, causing trouble in the city, and eventually the Avengers would respond to them. There are 7 members of the Avengers in total for this what if. The members are Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, Captain Marvel, Captain America, Wasp, and Ant-Man. So they're pretty strong, there's some pretty heavy hitters. Eventually the Avengers would investigate, the Fatal Five, and will begin to get in combat with them. They would continue to fight, but eventually the Fatal Five would escape like they did originally. So they would begin to plant their bombs and begin to threaten the civilians, blowing up everything essentially. They would send a message to Thor saying that if Thor must come to where they are, they will, continue to damage New York. The Avengers would go out disabling the bombs and sending as many civilians as they can. Thor, being extremely confident and arrogant, thinks he's more than enough to stop the Fatal Five, but decides to play their game until he can set up an opening to finish them off. Thor would go to, investigate the Fatal Five, and the Fatal Five would explain that they need access to a Norn Stone, which will help them in their goal. Thor would take them to wherever the Norn Stone was. We'll see the Avengers had a Norn Stone in the Avengers Tower, and they were just studying it, and the Norn Stone was going to do what the Fatal Five needed to do. They would eventually go to the Norn Stone, and once Thor realized what they wanted, he would eventually begin to attack them once they actually reached the Norn Stone. The Fatal Five would be pretty strong. The Fatal Five defeated Kilowog and most of the other Green Lanterns. Hulk is stronger than the Green Lantern. I would say since the Fatal Five were able to fight against Wonder Woman, Superman, and even have weapons that can hurt Superman, that their magic should be strong enough to hurt Thor. It's tricky, but Thor isn't much stronger than that version of Wonder Woman, and so if all of them jump them, it's possible they could defeat Thor. We'll say they do. They defeat Thor, and eventually they then go to gather the Nornstone, and then they will leave this dimension and go to the Green Lantern dimension. They will defeat the few Green Lanterns guarding it, free their girlfriend, and just like that, the plot would begin. So the plot would be to basically destroy the sun and kill all the heroes on their dimension's Earth. Thor would tell them what happened, and Star-Lord would tell them that they probably went back to his dimension and would tell them the plan. Star-Lord wouldn't be forgetful because he wouldn't have amnesia this time thanks to time travel, and he wouldn't be putting them into asylum, so he should be pretty mentally good here. Eventually, they would travel using Star-Lord and Iron Man tech, and they would eventually travel to the DC Universe dimension to stop the Fatal Five. A battle would ensue, and eventually they would begin to fight. Now, this is where the Avengers might lose, to be honest. The Justice League, they would easily defeat, well, not easily, but in medium to high difficulty, defeat the higher up members of the Fatal Five. But eventually the woman would eventually put them, in that electricity. This electricity was so strong that it held back Superman, and it's probably a mixture of magic and all that other stuff. It's possible Thor's hammer can counter magic, as Thor's hammer can counter magic and kind of stop it. Iron Man's armor in his universe anyway is able to weaken magical stuff for some fucking reason. And Iron Man has also developed a counter to certain magical constructs. If Star-Lord gave Iron Man a possible debrief on what the magic can do, it's possible they can survive it, but eventually they would get held down and the Fatal Five would retreat like they did in the original. It really doesn't matter if they beat them anyway, since the Fatal Five would just retreat and just leave, which would leave the Avengers to try and stop. It's very possible that they probably won't be able to withstand this. Maybe Hulk, if he got strong enough, could break out of it. But again, I mentioned that Hulk might be weaker than Superman, and Superman wasn't able to break out of it. So if this happens, then the Avengers might be cooked. But Wasp maybe can shrink down, which will give pause to the other members. She would eventually start to attack the Alien Queen, which will disrupt her focus. Once her focus got disrupted, even Jessica Drew was able to defeat basically all of them. And I don't know if Jessica Drew got an amp, and I don't know if this scales her above Superman. Like I said, I think the Justice League Mercer got caught off guard. But if this does happen, the Avengers could jump the Queen and defeat her. Either way, eventually they would have to stop the sun bomb threat. This is when Star-Lord would come and sacrifice himself like he did in the original. He would sacrifice himself, save them, and just like that, eventually his other heroes would arrive. The Avengers would have a funeral form or whatever, and the other heroes would arrive and give their condolences, and then the Avengers would meet the League of Legion, I guess. Even though they aren't the Justice League, they would give the Avengers their props and say that they are a force equal to the Justice League in being awesome heroes or whatever. And just like that, the movie would end. Now the Avengers might get their ass kicked by the Fatal Five during the final battle. It's very possible that they'll just lose right there. But even if they lose the battle, the Fatal Five was gonna retreat anyway. So the Avengers actually don't need to defeat the Fatal Five to win. They just have to stop the Sun plot, and it's very possible that they can do that because Star-Lord can stop it, and Star-Lord is whatever his name, Starboy is here. So yeah, they would pretty much just do the exact same thing the Avengers did. If the Fatal Five decide to go out of their way to kill the Avengers, and the Avengers lose, and the Earth probably gets destroyed. But since the Fatal Five didn't do that in the original, and they had a perfect opportunity to kill the Justice League, but decided to just leave instead, then we'll just say that if it's a 1-to-1, then the Avengers, even if they get their asses kicked and lose the battle, should be able to survive and save the planet, since the Fatal Five would just leave and retreat anyway. But that's pretty much it. This is how I believe the Avengers would do if they, fought against the Fatal Five or whatever. they would pretty much do all right until the end, where the Queen would defeat them all. But since the Queen wouldn't kill the Avengers and would just leave, since the whole, well, she thinks the whole Earth is about to be destroyed, the Avengers would just recover after the battle, and Starboy would just save the planet. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. This was a cool what if. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. It's gonna be a very short video. We'll go ahead. The final Survive series involving the Avengers for a minute is gonna be if the Avengers could stop the Legion of Doom. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Like and comment if you enjoyed it, and Dev Sentence out.